Have you seen the news lately?
It is a historic day.
It is a great day to be in New York City, well, unless you're one person.
For the first time ever, an indictment of a former president of the United States.
As I saw 44th President of the United States, Donald Trump, get arrested and indicted, a thought came to my head. What about the others? America has had its fair share of presidential scandals, from Harding and his bribes to Clinton and Monica Lewinsky.
I'm happy you finally found love.
Presidents have always been getting in trouble, but most importantly, also getting away with it. The #1 champion at this is Richard Nixon, who was not indicted for any of his crimes during or after his presidency. Instead, he was simply humiliated by the press and faced impeachment, which he masterfully avoided by resigning before the House of Representatives could even vote.
It has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort.
But in the end, Nixon was not indicted and did not suffer any real consequences. But why? What did Nixon do? Why Trump, but not Nixon? Security guard Frank Wills noticed something odd at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. Upon further investigation, he found a piece of tape covering a door latch in the basement of the DNC headquarters. He immediately called the police. The officers arrived and found 5 men carrying bugging equipment, cameras, and thousands of dollars in cash. 3 out of the 5 guys were Cuban. 4 of them had prior connections to the CIA, and all of them worked for CREEP, also known as the Committee to Re-elect the President. This group was established by President Nixon's campaign team in 1971, with the goal of ensuring his re-election in the 1972 election. Let's just say, CREEP took this to heart, starting a larger campaign of political espionage and sabotage. As soon as the information was out that the culprits were part of CREEP, investigations into the Watergate break-in and Nixon's involvement started. Richard Nixon was born in California in 1913. He was an excellent student who graduated from law school at 24 and for a few years after that practiced law in California. Nixon joined the Navy during World War II and served as a logistics officer at the South Pacific Theater. After the war, Nixon was celebrated as a war hero, which encouraged him to enter politics. Throughout his political career, he became known as a staunch anti-communist and a proponent of a strong military, which caught the attention of presidential nominee Dwight D. Eisenhower, who selected Nixon as his running mate for the 1952 election.
For president, you like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president.
The pair won a landslide victory, and Nixon served as vice president under Eisenhower from 1953 to 1961. If we don't include the Korean War or the lack of support for civil rights, the country experienced economic growth and low unemployment, mainly thanks to the development of highways and other infrastructure projects. After these 2 terms, Nixon ran for president in 1960, but lost to the youthful and charismatic John F. Kennedy.
I would like to take this opportunity to express my fondness for Duff beer.
I'd also like to express my fondness for that particular beer.
After some unfortunate events, Nixon now ran against Democrat Hubert Humphreys and independent George Wallace in the 1968 general election, this time winning the presidency with 301 electoral votes. Nixon inherited a tricky situation upon taking office. A bloody and expensive Vietnam War had the United States deeply divided and in a recession. One of Nixon's first moves was to implement a policy of One of Nixon's first move was to implement a policy of Vietnamization, which involved gradually withdrawing American troops from Vietnam while increasing support for the South Vietnamese army. Nixon continued the war and expanded the conflict, secretly bombing and invading neighboring countries Cambodia and Laos. Nixon also had good measures during his presidency. He improved relations between the United States and China when he visited in 1972. He was involved in negotiations to end the Vietnam War, and although his administration promoted policies that were harmful to the environment, Nixon did sign the Clean Air Act and the Endangered Species Act into law, both of which are still in effect today. No matter what you think of his presidency, Nixon will always be remembered by the Watergate scandal and one of the most famous investigations in US history.
I have never been a quitter.
The impeachment process began on February 1974, led by a special committee to investigate the Watergate scandal. Congressman Peter Rodino held a series of televised hearings that revealed the administration's illegal activities. Things only got worse in July 1974, when the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that Nixon had to overturn recorded White House tapes to the special prosecutor. The tapes contained incriminating evidence against Nixon and clearly proved his involvement in the cover-up. This was seen as unacceptable, so in August 1974, the House Judiciary Committee approved 3 articles of impeachment against Nixon. This forced Nixon to announce his resignation in a nationally televised address on August 8, 1974.
I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president.
The following day, he officially resigned, and Vice President Gerald Ford was sworn into office. So then Nixon obviously went to prison for sabotage and obstruction of justice. Actually, Nixon was named an unindicted co-conspirator by the grand jury, and on September 8, 1974, Nixon was granted a presidential pardon by his successor, President Gerald Ford. Coming soon.